I would say, good fortune that we have, in fact, of course, the speaker Prashant Hotsoke, what I think his mentor and the person around which this program is being built is one Raghu Kale. He is an international celebrity, I will say. He has this book, Loyalty and Sacrifice, which is now one of the bestseller books. Raghu Kale has been the vice president and I think the brand custodian of Tata Sons for many, many years. And he is a communication honcho. He has made great impact on the, I would say, various corporates, senior people, and he has kind of motivated them to change the way they kind of think about their organization. And the program was built around his book, Loyalty and Sacrifice. And that's where they have come out with this organization called Striking Ideas, of which he is the chief. And Prashant, who was earlier the head of marketing and many other things at Max Healthcare, is the managing director and president and whatever. So I will now hand over to Raghu Kale. It's really very nice of you. So early in the morning, he's speaking from United States and he's with us. And thank you very much. And Raghu, over to you. And then you can even introduce Prashant even more.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think these are very strange times we are living through. And thank you for a short introduction. You are very generous in praising me in my achievements, which was news to me to some extent. But I would like to say that I'm delighted. I'm delighted that Prashant's leadership is bringing these concepts that he and I discussed when I had finished writing the book. And he could readily see the vision going forward as to how this learning can make valuable sense to corporates around the world. And without getting too much in the way, I think I thank Dr. Agarwal for this opportunity and your team being there and so many silently contributing people behind this platform who are not known to us, but we expect and hope that as we transcend through the next few months, there will be much more to deep dive and engage and look at opportunities going forward. And Prashant is really leading this effort with me. And I thank Prashant for all the effort that he's put in. And when he calls me and says that I have to be on a call, no matter what time of day or night it is, I will be there. So here I am. And I would like to hear any question that you have at the end of this, and Prashant will lead this effort. And thank you, Prashant, for being there and taking the lead forward. Without getting too much into it, over to you, Prashant. Take it on from here. Yeah. Thank you. You are on mute.
Okay, thank you, Raghu, and thank you, Dr. Agarwal, first of all, for giving us this opportunity to showcase what we think is very unique, very different. Very few corporates, I guess, have seen this concept. Something very traditional has been broken through, if you wish, and you will see more about that as we go forward. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for making time for connecting to this session. We hope to make it interesting, hope to make it such that you'll have some key learnings as you take away at the end of the session. I'd like to, even before I go ahead, engage your mind in saying, you know, the title of this session, 3 words, Are Organizations Alive? Think about that, mull over this as we go through this whole session, because it's all about, you know, how do we really make an organization alive, especially so in your kind of industry, which is healthcare. So if we were to, therefore, I'll share my screen with you. I don't think it's shared yet. Can you see my screen now? I'm hoping you do. You can. So
We can.
Okay. So I truly believe in this. The heart of healthcare is something which is unique. Um, I believe it's a noble profession of liberating human suffering from pain to the pleasures. Um, it's something which I think, I was mentioning the other day to Dr. Agarwal as well. There are two professions I have amazing regard for. One is the profession of healthcare, and the other is um, armed forces. So it's a profession which I have great respect and regard for. Um, I will have to. Something happening to my keyboard, I guess. Okay. Now this may sound like a strange uh, sort of a figure to you, but I think the point I'm making here is like if the perfume bottle is left open and not refilled, the fancy label on the bottle remains, but the perfume evaporates. Metaphorically speaking, I mean. Point I'm making is that at times there are processes that are around for years, since years, and even if they've lost their meaning, and hence over time the organizations keeps looking and feeling more and more mechanical and less alive. So there are processes because they should be around, but they are having no more meaning and they're not around. Really, there's no life there. I give you an example from a slightly different industry, though, but very similar to yours. I spent several years in hospitality, incidentally. I was with the Taj group of hotels, like Raghu was as well. And I happened to be one day, as part of my responsibility, walking through processes, the heart of the house processes, as we used to call them, as well as the front of the house processes. And here was a situation where I walked into a room service order taker's office. And a young lady was there. She was talking about what orders were being taken. She was noting it down. What was interesting was, or strange if you ask me, was while we had a fantastic system called Fidelio, in which all orders were being, input, keyed in, she also was having a register next to her, and every order was being written in that register. So I obviously had to curious and I asked her, why doing this? And she said, well, sir, you know what? I have been moved here only for 2 months now, and it's been happening since the time I came. So I sort of continue to do it. But you may want to check with the room service manager who's sitting out there, and he showed me pointed out to the manager's office. So I went across to the manager. Curiosity kills the cat, as they say. So I went there and I said, Mr. Manager, why do you do this? And he said, well, you know what? I've actually been moved here very recently. The restaurant manager of that so-and-so restaurant is the one who might be able to help you because he's been around since a long time. I'm not the kind of guy who will give up. So I went to that room service, the restaurant manager's restaurant, and asked the person, what's this for? And this went on. I'm going to cut the long story short. I reached finally the F&B manager, and the F&B manager finally told me, this Fidelio system has been in place since the last 2 years or so. When we started this system, we were told that, for about a few months or so, in addition to inputting all the data into the system, I think you should also write it in the register as just to phase in, phase out the automated system. But now you're telling me they're still writing it? He was shocked. No one knew that the process which was put in place was still going on blindly and everyone was mechanically doing it. And I said, wow, this is amazing. But there was still one question that remained unanswered. And I went back to the order taker and said, ma'am, what do you do with this register when it's over? And the young girl, she got up, jumped off her seat in joy, as if to say, my gosh, finally I can respond to this question. One question that this person asked. So she hopped out of her seat, jumped next to her office, and opened a huge cupboard, which had all registers from God knows, I think 4 years, 5 years. And here I was thinking, my gosh, here is amazing amount of data that's being collected, but it's not being converted into information And it's practice which was there, a process which was there, has just been around for a long, long time. The point I'm making is sometimes we do this even in healthcare. Uh, I happen to be, so some of you who are not aware, I happen to spend a few years in healthcare as well. My last job was with the Max Group, but beyond healthcare, I was the group head of service quality and excellence and innovation, sitting at the corporate office, overseeing the function for all the Max companies. Max Healthcare happened to be one of them. And hence, I can sort of relate to some of these things that happen in healthcare as well. Now, in healthcare, with all due respects, but sometimes we have these extremely fancy front offices, extremely fancy things that we keep for the so-called patients to see. But when we did a qualitative and a quantitative survey with the customers, the patients and their attendants, guess what? What we were told is that actually none of this is important to us. What was most important is when I come there and I've been told I have to be admitted, I obviously have to ask for insurance. So when I contact my insurance company, the insurance company takes donkey's years to approve my amount, or sometimes don't even approve. And you're saying 5 lakhs, I don't even have one. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. So here was this company who worked on improving that pre-approved approval process, and it was reduced to less than 30 minutes. Over 95% of the times, less than 30 minutes, there was a pre-approval. But the point is, until we did that survey, no one knew that that's the most important thing for the customer. We thought front office and all those fancy things was the most important. Another one, this happened to be during my consulting days many years ago, and we were at the happened to be at the Aga Khan University Hospital, and again sitting with doctors, clinicians, and non-clinicians, and we spent some time discussing what do you think is most important to the customer. Guess what? All of them said, well, I think it's the quality of doctors, and that's why they come here. Again, with complete respect, you guys do a fabulous job about whatever you do. You look after lives of people, but they thought it was quality of doctors. The survey said quality of doctors in terms of importance was number 9. And what was more important was things like getting through on the telephone to the doctor, waiting time for getting admitted, waiting time to see the doctor when it's OPD, and so on. And quality of doctors was number 9. So obviously, I knew this would have been a bit of a startling finding. So I had gone and also asked one additional question to the patients. How come you're saying this is number 9? Don't you think that's the first? And all of them, almost all of them said, well, you know what? If we are coming to this kind of a hospital and paying this kind of money, we assume that the quality of doctors are really good. So it's not even a need. It is an assumption. It's a vanilla item. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come here. We could have just gone to any mom and pop sort of clinic. Why did we come here? And that was a bit of a strange and startling finding for that hospital. Point is, we got to be clear that customers can be funny people, if I may say so. Their needs are moving targets; they keep changing, and we got to be sure that the processes are completely integrated and they cross organizational boundaries. And what do you think I mean by that? What I mean is that the importance of recognizing partners is also extremely critical. The mindset of suppliers versus partners, very critical, especially in this kind of industry. Let's take examples of strategic partners. F&B, I think most healthcare organizations, this is outsourced. Pharmacy, more and more that's getting outsourced. And I'm saying we should be working together with them. And when I was working with a few healthcare organizations earlier, I found that we were at loggerheads with one another rather than working as partners. And I believe one of the reasons is because the vision, mission, values of this healthcare organization weren't shared with them to say, we are in this together, you're partners with us. So whatever we do it together. So this is an important aspect of healthcare. I want to leave this thought with you all, which I find very interesting. And the digital age, the age of digital is here to stay, is infused in almost everything. We can't get away from there. And this, I'm sure you heard about. Um, IBM's Watson supercomputer may soon be the best doctor in the world. And I'm going to read what's on the slide out there because I think it's sort of important. Um, Watson is already capable of storing far more medical information than doctors, and unlike humans, his decisions are all evidence-based and free of cognitive biases and overconfidence. It's also capable of understanding natural language, generating hypotheses, evaluating the strengths of those hypotheses, and just not storing data but finding meaning in it. Now that's a big deal. There's this article that I came across. Many of you would have already maybe read it. It's a 2017 article, but I thought this is very interesting. The role of the physician and how it's changing. 5 key trends. I put on the screen only 4, but if you all have not had a chance to go through this article, if I may, sirs and ma'am, I would really request you all to read it. This presentation will reach you all later after this session, so you can get a link of this article later. And if those of you are interested, I would strongly recommend please do read this. The attitude of therefore saying that, hey, you know what, doctors saying, clinicians saying, I'm very busy, is going to go, it will have to go very quickly. And instead, there'll have to be compassion, there'll have to be companionship as demonstrated with the patient, rather than saying, we are doctors, and it's slightly it's a little difficult to handle that situation with patients sometimes. And I completely appreciate the pressures that clinicians are typically, but that's going to change very quickly. Value versus values. So what then makes organizations truly alive? Many corporations have focused sharply on maximizing stakeholder value for whoever is associated with them. And guess what? The community at large is also taken care, but only with the demeanor of creating goodwill for their own benefit, any which way. The temptation that when we ever do something good for the community at large, the hidden agenda seems to be always, it improves our brand, our reputation in the marketplace. It's clearly not the most righteous way or the only way to look at it. This way, we're actually saying that we are in effect serving those 5 to 6 immediate stakeholders, and the broader community at large is useful to build their own goodwill, but hey, it helps our brand. That's more important. There's a concept called conscious capitalism. It is indeed a vibrant new conversation. You got to do it because you really want to do it. Who do you think said this? I'm going to read this slide for you very carefully. I would hope that none of the companies that are displaying social responsibility are doing it for their reputation or for their kudos or for the publicity that it may get for them. Any guesses? Who could have said this? Is this a businessman? Is this a bureaucrat? Is this a head of state? Is this a local politician concerned about his local electoral votes and forces? There are mom and pop healthcare clinics who are very much involved in their own local community. Traditional values are essential, but then the big bad world, competitive pressures and pressures from investors are a harsh reality. Let's face it. And we've all been there, done that. And so the humble intentions are not always possible for many. Some say this is very unusual, can't be. I don't think this is possible. If this person is heading the organization, perhaps he then seems to be really believing in what he says. If not, he's just saying it, but I must be a politician. Here's who said this.
I would hope that none of the companies that are displaying social responsibility are doing it for their reputation or for the kudos or for the publicity it may get them. That they are doing it therefore for the right reasons. Because we owe it to that community. We, in many ways, many companies think that they just bring prosperity to a community. Very few companies consider what they take out of that community. The jobs that get misplaced, the land that gets taken up. Compensation may be paid, but it's still a displacement. There's the issue of a company coming into a community but not employing people from that community because they don't have the skills. We have to recognize that we have a responsibility other than plunking ourselves in a community and operating in our own isolated way without being sensitive to what we need to put back into the community from which we are gaining prosperity. An industry that goes into a non-industrial area and takes away from that area, I think has to recognize that they need to be responsible to the people of that community in which they exist, and that they owe them that responsibility and they owe them that kind of caring. And if industry is insensitive to it and considers themselves to be above and beyond this, and that sensitivity has to be imposed by the government, then I don't think that industry in that form is going to survive in the long term. There would need to be change, and many of these companies have changed in time based on the pressures on them. I think the difference is that the Tata Group has done this voluntarily and before pressures have been brought to bear on them or need to be brought to bear on them. Okay.
Coming from the man who epitomizes reverence, I repeat the word reverence, it seems so much more genuine, doesn't it? So the key question for leaders then is, how do you ensure your organizations are alive? Is it by balancing stakeholder engagement and hence value, which seems the most logical thing to do, and yet is not always done? It is not leaders, it's not like leaders pull out a calculator from their pocket and calculate how much and what ramifications we'll have. So if one were to look at some examples during the, for example, during this downturn, the furloughs, the layoffs, and so on, there is some method to it, don't you think? I'm sorry, something wrong I did. Okay. I'm sure you've heard of this concept of VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. The question is, as if the world is linear and everything is operated as it comes across, and therefore they created fancy terms like VUCA, as if these things never existed. Of course they existed. Volatility, dirty surprises always existed and will continue to be there. And leaders have to make a decision about certain situations, certain events, and so on. The question for leaders is they need to get their hands around this. And it's only about maximizing shareholder value, or are we a long time player? Do we want to be around for a long time, or is it just about somehow satisfying shareholders and move on with life? I wonder if you've read this book, Built to Last. Oldish one, but those of you who haven't, I would again recommend this. It's as the title says, Successful Habits of Visionary Companies. I'm reminded of this because the author Jim Collins and Jerry Porras come up with a few shattered myths in industry, generally in industry. And the two that stand out for me: the most successful companies exist first and foremost to maximize profits. Shattered myth. Another shattered myth: the most successful companies focus primarily on beating the competition. Shattered myth. Here's the gentleman again. During this, the whole process of COVID-19 and what have you, companies were laying off people. And Mr. Tata said, layoffs during pandemic shows India incorporates lack of empathy. Here's another company, General Motors, that said General Motors to restore full pay for 69,000 workers, but CEO to keep a salary cut. Why go too far? You may know this company. I unfortunately won't be able to share it, but a healthcare company here in India, the top management of the company decided to take a salary cut, but no layoffs. Here's another one, Canon, the concept of CAHO. And I'd like you to read what the then president, the former president said. Many companies around the world believe that they have a moral duty to respond to global problems such as third world poverty, the deterioration of the natural environment, and endless trade battles. At this watershed period in history, it is in the interest of the world's most powerful corporations to work for the advancement of global peace and prosperity. To put it simply, global companies have no future if the earth has no future. Now, that's a very powerful statement to make. And coming from the president of Canon, a Fortune 50 company, what's in it for them? They could just go on. They were doing so financially well. But here is this gentleman who's going one step further to say this. Here's another author, Milton Friedman, who actually was the author of and the conceptualized this thing called capitalism, the conscious capitalism, and he said, at Striking Ideas, we have this concept about loyalty systems and how they could work. We have absorbed the seminal article in 1962 by this gentleman, wherein he brings out a very fundamental debate whether or not a corporation or an entity or a company is only myopically focused on maximizing stakeholder engagement and hence value for those who are associated with it. We can't agree with all his good work, but we merely are reflecting on it. There is growing attention on conscious capitalism, and the only way it can get better is not when external forces impose restrictions. That would be a disaster, if you ask me. In my view, the only way it can get better is through self-realization. And you're wondering why I've put that Jiminy Cricket out there. He's the one who kept making Pinocchio aware of. I mean, it was his conscience. So that's the point that I'm making out there. Here's another video I'd like you to see. What is leadership challenge today?
The world has seen the past century progress, with business enterprises riding the waves of prosperity, bringing ingenuity coupled with the boom of technological progress. Evolution is the essence of life. Like a living organism, organizations aspire to achieve success. Strive towards excellence. Pledge commitments for a cause. Care about their reputation. Build character and capabilities. Promote and abide by values and commit to a shared mission. Organizations indeed are made up of people. Successful organizations outlive the lifespan of everyone associated with it. Those responsible for it shape its destiny. Running the business and changing the business is about going beyond a transactional mindset. Deep sense of reverence is a precondition for achieving excellence. Whenever human interaction occurs, it presents an opportunity to collaborate, cooperate, compromise, and adjust. There is a new conversation for enhancing value for B2B and vantage point endorsed by global leaders about the book, Loyalty and Sacrifice, ushering new horizons for business leaders in the digital age, brings out the need for systems thinking with L&S principles from the book, unraveling the hidden facets to nurture loyalty systems. The L&S principles strengthens the fabric of respect and reverence. The L&S principles facilitate the translation of strategic priorities. The L&S principles have scrubbed the distortions in defining loyalty that has existed for over 200 years. It is a call for visionary leadership to explore the tenets of the L&S principles. It is time to open your mind to a new vantage point and usher new horizons for business success.
At Striking Ideas, therefore, this sort of changes a whole lot of things. We recognize the three visionary allures, which we believe are the new way of looking at leaders and leadership. Allure number one, comprehend value beyond a transactional mindset. Number two, think about value creation in selfless equations. And last but surely not the least, in fact, my favorite, create value for humanity across generations. Don't think it's just my company and hey, you know what? I'm the CEO or leader or whatever, and I'm going to go away in 5 years. That's not how companies really become great and visionary, and that's not how leaders think. So really, to us, this is the new definition of a visionary leader. At Striking Ideas, our loyalty and sacrifice basis is sharply anchored on these fundamental tenets that we spoke about just now. Those of you who have read the book, Loyalty and Sacrifice, Ushering New Horizons for Business Leaders, will recognize the importance of what it takes to embrace passions and the alignment of values and vision across all stakeholders. You cannot achieve excellence. The point being made is you cannot achieve excellence unless you put others ahead of you, support others and receive all the support you can get. You will never achieve true and genuine state of excellence unless you have the reverence and the humility supporting each other. Going forward, that will be the hallmark of genuine organizations that nurture excellence at all levels. When I say, by the way, leaders, I mean leaders at all levels. Even a janitor is a leader in some ways, right? So they're leaders, not just the CEO, but everyone who's is managing a team. The existing definition of customer loyalty, therefore, useful but grossly inadequate, which, by the way, happens to be percentage of repeat purchase. It needs a more holistic definition, and that's what we at Striking Ideas are using for all its our new age deliverables to usher new horizons for business success. This is the context of this concept of reverence, going beyond just excellence. And I'd say it's a precondition, in fact, to excellence, enabling excellence, whichever way you look at it. We offer two sessions. One is a top executive briefing, and as the word would suggest, it is for leaders, CEOs, and CXOs. And that sort of explains the what of this concept called loyalty and sacrifice. And the next is an expert's huddle, which is more like the how of the concept, the how, the tools, techniques. How do you make this happen actually in the healthcare organization? In fact, Dr. Agarwal and I have been in discussions in some time now to sort of say maybe we should do something together through CAHO and maybe also some in-house programs. Both of these programs, one for top leaders as well as the experts huddles for explaining the how of this whole thing. While it seems like from the title of the book, we are expecting stakeholders to do some kind of sacrificial activity, that's not true, by the way. Let me clarify that right up front. Our intention is surely not to extract or induce sacrifice from any of the stakeholders. The skewed definition of loyalty for war heroes and employees is one that of going beyond the call of duty, which is okay. That's celebrated, it's expected in some ways. However, when one speaks about customers, the big question is, if customers are capable of sacrifice, are they really capable of sacrifice? And the short answer is yes. They sacrifice in some measure, and it's ignored because the 200-year-old definition of customer loyalty that is still used by many companies is misplaced, which is percentage of repeat customers. We certainly need a fresh, new, and a common definition, especially in a healthcare situation. Maybe the customer is coming back to you because the doctor is attached with that particular clinic or the hospital. Given a choice, if the doctor moves away, he just may move away with that doctor. That's that much more dangerous. So clearly, there are blind spots about how loyalty ought to be viewed about customers. And the book Loyalty and Sacrifice really helps you to look at this very, very differently. Here's the definition of customer loyalty as defined by Raghu Kale in the book. I'm not going to read the whole slide because it's a busy one, but I just leave this with you to say there's a very different definition versus the commonly understood definition on the right-hand side. The new definition is on the left. I'll only read probably a few lines from the slide on the left-hand side. Customer loyalty can be said to have occurred when customers have a willingness to accommodate and make concessions. The manifestation of such accommodation resides in the confidence that customers have in the product, the corporate, or the brand towards which the loyalty occurs. As the very nature of loyalty is not about attracting attention or to be in the spotlight, the acts of loyalty can range from being elusive to willing to sacrifice one's share of wallet, and so on and so forth. I'm going ahead at the moment because it's a longish one. There's also a definition of loyalty, which Raghu has pretty much gone deep down to say this is really the definition of loyalty and the origin of the word loyalty from the 1400s and how it's changed over time. Arising out of this definition are 4 loyalty axioms: silence, latitude, shared values and vision, and futility, that are applicable both in a business or a political realm. This is a brief explanation of the 4 axioms, which I won't get into, but can be explained separately, maybe in the executive briefing if you're around for that one. But surely, what's more important to share with you is that the 4 axioms that apply to pretty much every stakeholder give rise to what are called the 4 LNS principles: the principle of wallet, elusive, passion, and silence. These are the 4 principles based on which a loyalty system needs to be built. Here are a few more books. The first I've already covered. In Search of Excellence, I'm sure you all have heard about this one, and Built to Last also covered. In Search of Excellence, incidentally, probably was the one which gave rise to excellence frameworks like the Baldrige and others, at least inspired by this book. I would shall I say, dare say that some of these books are excellent, no doubt about it, but I don't think there was a follow-up action to say, okay, these are the traits of these fantastic organizations, but how did they actually do that? The how, in a sense, wasn't there in some of these books. I'd like to believe that the book Loyalty and Sacrifice will help you get there, will help you build loyalty systems which cover all stakeholders, and therefore will help you to reach those organizations of reverence and excellence. Here's a situation where, again, we're saying how leaders shape their organizations and bring to life is fascinating, I would say. We know that leaders have to make exceptions and decide based on the new realities. And the new reality at the moment is the COVID era. Making an exception is not easy. And leaders, as good managers, hide behind sometimes employee manuals, sometimes behind past practices. And what's permissible by laws and regulations and employee manuals. Several leaders do that because they are so much into my responsibility to the shareholders, my responsibility, or I'm answerable to the board. Leaders with a huge cache of their personal equity can go against the headwind, in our opinion. Leaders are able to do that only if they have a certain sense of equity, a brand equity of their own personal brand. Successful leaders, therefore, learn all the time, adapt and evolve for themselves and for their organization to bring it alive. As leaders, they have to be. I mean, this kind of reminds me of, back in my consulting days, where we would say that, there's a great temptation to say, consultants, okay, keep going from one client to the other and make a lot of pots of money. Well, that's very tempting, all right. But honestly speaking, we had this policy to say, you can't take more than 14, 15 days in a month of assignments. The rest of the time, you got to be reading, you got to be learning, you got to be understanding different new concepts and updating yourself. I'm sure all or many of you do that, but that's a point that is being made at this point in time. I bring this black slide back again. The details of what we're saying now are available in these two workshops. What is important is to say that companies get into sometimes pseudo ways of sporadic team building exercises, sometimes sports exercises, and so on to make companies alive. All that is good, but that's just scratching the surface. It's a good feel good. It brings in some activity. It's a bit like rats on wheels, a lot of activity, but I wonder what really happens. There will be differences always. But to be able to compromise, adjust, accommodate is an ongoing thing, and organizations are indeed alive. Only organizations with a soul and a spirit are able to make these choices with a deep-rooted purpose. I'm sure you would agree when I say that organizations are not machines. They are living organisms. Organizations outlive all those associated with it. People will die. I mean, let's face it, we're not God. People will die. Great organizations live. They'll continue to live after many of us go away. And organizations have aspirations, hope, supporting each other, and so on. Excellence cannot be achieved without having a mindset of supporting the other, working in an ecosystem, if you wish, working together, all the stakeholders together. And what better example could I give than expeditions to the space, to the moon, and so on, as an analogy to describe that. When you see organizations driving excellence or thinking of driving excellence, I always wonder whether excellence can be achieved with a mean face. Can it be really achieved with a mean face? Or is it being best always the lean, mean, fighting, fight, well-oiled machine kind of thing? Is that what an excellent organization is all about? Excellence needs to be surely humility. Excellence can't be achieved without humility. And what better understanding of that than look at space research, space exploration? All that is is a symbolic way in which you could put somebody else before you, and whether it's astronauts, whether it's engineers, whether it's vendors, you name it, they're all working together. And that's what is about excellence. The passion of driving something beyond your own reach epitomizes what excellence is all about. Whenever you see a new vantage point and you embrace it, it opens up new opportunities for you. You have to see things from a different perspective, from a different standpoint. Only then you can open your mind, is our view of striking ideas. And that's probably what happened when the astronauts went to the moon. They were all focused for several years on thinking that we have to go to the moon, we have to do research, we have to pick up the soil, see whether there is life on moon, and so on and so forth. But guess what? What happened when they turned and landed to the moon and turned back, when they looked behind, we were all thinking of moonrise and sunrise till then. What they actually saw was Earthrise, a fragile little thing suspended in space that really hit them. The whole generation grew up looking at the Earth from outer space. Nobody could even fathom or imagine what the Earth would look like from the outer space. That to me that sort of changed the whole human mindset and human psyche. And while I was thinking about this, I figured that it is the ability to put somebody else before you that is a very powerful way to see how the alignment of values and vision come together. Only when that happens, you're sort of willing to compromise, adjust, sacrifice, and work together, is when you achieve that state of reverence or excellence. And sacrifice, of course, is the highest order. I mean, it's a strong word on the higher spectrum of work, the whole spectrum of accommodating, adjusting, and going beyond the call of duty. All of those are the lesser versions of sacrificing. Hence, it's not so necessary for organizations to drive inside. It's so necessary for organizations to even look inside out with a sense of reverence, with a sense of humility, with a sense of respect for one another. I remember someone once telling me that tyrants lead organizations and they're successful. So what's the big fuss you're making? They lead by fear, and fear is a mediocre drug, if you ask me. Doesn't really achieve excellence. All you achieve is short-term results. People will comply. So it's a compliance strategy. It's not an excellent strategy. And these hidden perils are there. There are leaders and they'll continue to be those kind of leaders. The point being made is, we know that these kind of organizations can't exist for too long. If you want to nurture a sense of excellence, nurture an ecosystem where people can thrive and do better, I believe loyalty systems and the LNS principles is the way forward. Reverence is the way forward. We pulling it all together is what we would call loyalty system.
Many willingly set forth another before thee. A deep sense of reverence permeates silently. Trials and tribulations consumed many. Humanity knew sunrise and moonrise for many millennia. Then, awe dawned on watching the earth rise. A newfound reverence for Mother Earth left an indelible mark on the human psyche. Indeed, new perspectives fuel progress. A deep sense of reverence is a precondition for achieving excellence. interaction occurs. It presents an opportunity to collaborate, cooperate, compromise, and adjust. There is a new conversation for enhancing value for B2B and B2C businesses. A new vantage point endorsed by global leaders about the book, Loyalty and Sacrifice, Ushering New Horizons for Business Leaders in the Digital Age, brings out the need for systems thinking with the LNS principles from the book, unraveling the hidden facets to nurture loyalty systems. The LNS principles strengthens the fabric of respect and reverence. The LNS principles facilitate the translation of strategic priorities. The LNS principles have scrubbed the distortions in defining loyalty that has existed for over 200 years. Loyalty and sacrifice are inseparable. In the case of war heroes and employees, sacrifice is well recognized and celebrated. In the case of customers, the question is, are customers capable of sacrifice? It is time for a uniform definition of loyalty towards strengthening loyalty systems that can nurture the soul of an enterprise, anchored in delivering the strategic business outcomes. It is the reservoir of reverence that indeed is a precondition for achieving excellence. Running the business and changing the business is about going beyond the transactional mindset. It is a call for visionary leadership to explore the tenets of the LNS principles. It is time to open your mind to a new vantage point and usher new horizons for business success.
That pretty much brings me to the end of my discussion, Dr. Agarwal. If we are both available for questions, Raghu and me. Thank you very much. But before I say my thank you, over to you, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant, and for a very nice presentation. And can we now stop sharing the screen, maybe, so that we can all see each other?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I think it's very thought-provoking. Always these things are thought-provoking. But one thing I will say that, you said a very important thing, that customer loyalty has to be judged by the reverence quotient, as I can say, that you can generate in somebody. And towards that, actually, the healthcare has been one of the industries, I would say, which is running on the fuel of reverence. Although that reverence is eroding now, and that is something which we have to kind of look at as to what is the reasons for that erosion. Not necessarily that, because every time somebody may find fault only with the medical professionals for that erosion. It is probably not a very simple answer to that. But you see, the other thing is that a lot of these things are, of course, very applicable to very high-end corporate hospitals and things like that, for them to think on those lines. In terms of today, the biggest problem that the hospitals are having is the challenge to survive economically. There is no doubt. In fact, I think the doctors are doing huge amount of pro bono work etc., everything, the amount of work that they do for the community. But I think we may have a brainstorming with you to make you aware of the ground root reality in which an ordinary practitioner is working and what kind of the economic compulsions. And even for the organizations like Max and all that, which you have been heading, you understand that the quantum of profit, if any, in those organizations was very minimal. It was you were supporting them from the other industries to make them survive. And the double jeopardy is, number one, they don't survive economically, but they pose they are doing very well. And why they pose they are doing very well? Because they want people to invest money in them. So, and when you create a organization which has Italian floor and, you know, beautiful ambience, the person who walks in, he has a implied thing that you must be making tons of money. So you are making money. The issue is that you are not making money.
Yeah.
So I totally, in a sense that these values that you are talking about inherently are present, I would say, in majority of the medical people as a part of our profession and nature. Today, the same values are being vitiated by the economic scenario and by keeping, let's say today I want to keep patient safety as a very important goal for myself. Now, whenever an organization has some surplus funds and everything, all these things are extremely important, and you know, healthcare will be absolutely in the front. All right, that during this pandemic, no layoffs, no do this thing. But eventually, you have to have something to do that. And that's why a lot of organizations today, small ones, are winding up. They are not able to survive.
Sure.
So this definitely, what I will say is that it is something that an extremely important discussion around this particular entire theme. But it is very thought-provoking, and I'm sure that I'll request friends to ask any question or something what they have in mind. Please go ahead.
Doc, a quick reaction to what you're saying, though, before anyone jumps in. I couldn't agree with you more, but it's a bit of a, I completely agree that it's a bit of a catch-22, you know, what comes first, it's sort of a chicken and egg story. And I think the point that's being made is it is for leaders in the most difficult time to put that bet to say, listen, we do see that this is going to pay. It is going to pay probably in the not immediate sense, and immediately it is more important to keep the board happy and all of that. And I've been there, done that, so I know exactly what you mean. But it actually takes a lot of guts to for leaders to say we're willing to take that bet. You know, there is some money I have, funds I have. I'm willing to put that partly on short-term things which I need to do here and now. But there should be something that also should go into the slightly medium to long-term things as well. And that decision is a very difficult decision for CEOs to take. Whoever said uneasy is the head that wears the crown is so true. But the point is, it has to be, someone has to take that call. And the board is the situations like this. I think the board has to make that easier for the CEOs and the management team. You know, not expect that the CEOs will generate funds from somewhere. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave others to ask some questions if there are any. It's a great discussion, though.
Yeah, Joy, maybe you are running a very important organization, and maybe can.
So thank you very much. I think it was a very nice experience to hear the whole conversation. Only thing question to Mr. Prashant is, in this present scenario, can you give us 2-3 tips what hospital like ours who are presenting here can adapt and follow to reach the level of standard you are talking about, what we should do?
Raghu, help chip in if you have to, but I think it's a little difficult for me to respond to that, not knowing what you are already doing at this point in time. But surely, I think one of the things that comes to mind is ensuring that all your stakeholders are completely on the same page, first of all, is the basic thing to do. And I was giving the example to the other day to someone else, wherein I said that at times partners and vendors are the most quote unquote not looked after. For instance, I'm just making this example. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about Hinduja, but sort of obviously heard about it because I am a Mumbaiite, so I know Hinduja Hospital. But I'll only say this much, that vendors and partners are the most neglected at times like this. You just want to save your 100 square feet, your own 100 square feet. That comes as the most important priority. And here was this company who said, that's not fair, because they are our partners, they are our vendors, and they give us input that becomes so important to us to make sure that we give our service and delight our customers and make them really feel loyal. So here's what they did. They got all their key vendors in groups of 20 on a Zoom call and assured them that, hey, you know what? We are with you. We may be going through a problem at this point in time, and so are you, but we are not going to let you go. We will work with you through this whole extremely bad times. And same with partners. They did the same thing, and vendors who apparently later on separately spoke to the CEO, and mind you, the CEO was leading this discussion, and not some, anyone else. The CEO himself was on the call with all the vendors. And the CEO tells me, who's a good friend of mine, that several vendors came back and called him up separately after the call to say, this is the first time anyone has ever thought of doing this, and we feel so good about it. We really, for the first time, feel we are part of you. Incidentally, in that call, he also took this opportunity to share with them, what is my vision? What is my mission? What are my values? I want to live my values, truly live my values. And this is one way of showing you that I'm living my value, by calling all of you on a call. And this is just one example. I can keep talking about it, but Raghu, do you have to add anything?
Prashant, I think I was first of all, the comments Dr. Agarwal made really make sense, because this is an industry which is where the sense of reverence exists in a huge measure. And the only problem is that some of the good work which is being undertaken is sometimes in a blind spot. And the loyalty systems conversation that we have started is to bring a rhythm of making sure that we are shining a spotlight on all of these things and not left unattended to that extent, because loyalty is such a elusive thing that the quotient of compromising and sacrificing is hidden in plain sight. And when you put a spotlight on the stakeholders, your doctors, your nurses and others, and making sure that those blind spots are well covered, it can only get better. To the other point is that bringing vendors together on this common platform of having a conversation, because it starts with executive briefing, where we identify and look at what is the priority for the board and the operating team. And obviously, I think the list of prioritization as to what are the various areas that need to, so every organization will have different set of priorities, and the loyalty system that we are looking at in terms of all that Prashant explained is going to be catered to that specific organization to bring it alive from within inside out and taking it forward. So it can only get better. And the example that Prashant you brought in is a kind of one-off. And we don't want to make this as a one-off. We want to make this as an ongoing thing. Only under crisis you could bring vendors together and do all of that. But I think it needs to have a rhythm of its own.
Sure.
And take it forward. And the third thing I'd like to say is that the infusion of digital technologies is not going away. It's only going to get better from here on. I think the amount of infusion of new technologies and digital, which is going to be here to stay, what's going to happen in the next 5, 7 years, 10 years is going to even get more intense. So those opportunities are available now to open new doors and open new opportunities and new vantage points when you start talking about different vendors, different stakeholders, and look at it. So this conversation on loyalty systems as a platform, bringing this LNS principles is going to open new doors in new opportunities. One, you can think of past practices, but you have to start thinking about next practices, going beyond what can happen. And I think the world is changing pretty rapidly. So I like your comments, Dr. Agarwal. But yes, I think we want to put those, shine a light on those blind spots and make sure we take everyone together. And a lot of good work is taking place. And what better place to showcase this is the healthcare, because the sense of reverence is in huge measure available there, but it's under blind spot in some cases.
Thank you so much. I think we are now short of time also, and we have to wind up. And I think we will carry on this conversation and see that how do we carry this on. I think next time we have to do something in which there is more interaction rather than the just mere monologue. So as to kind of understand this particular, I would say, industry from the point of view of how do we apply the loyalty and sacrifice principles to this sector.
Sure.
So thank you very much, friends, and thank you very much, Raghu Kale, for taking out your very precious time. So we really appreciate. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Prashant. We will keep in touch.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Team CAHO, and thank you all who have been connected since the beginning. In fact, very, very nice of you to connect relatively, well, it's not very late in the evening, but it's a longish day, I'm sure, where you all had other things to do as well. So thank you very much, and we'll be in touch very soon, Doctor.